Webster defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome back to the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. This is the 2024 Team Autopsy Report for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Folks, we got a lot to cover, and I got you for the next 27 minutes, so we won't waste any time in breaking down this team from last season. Let's start with the head coach, Kirk Ferentz, the dean of coaches in the Big Ten. He has been with the Iowa Hawkeyes now, just completed his 26th season, folks. This coach in 328 games is 204 wins, 124 losses, a winning percentage of over 62%. So Coach Ferentz knows how to get it done. And when I talk about consistency, this is what this head coach has been during his tenure there. You want to go back and find the last season where he didn't win at least 6 games during the regular season, folks, you got to go all the way back to 2012 when he finished 4-8. Want to go back even further? You got to go back to his second season in Iowa, the year 2000, the last time that this head coach failed to win at least 6 games. So, like I said, model of consistency there from this particular head coach. Now, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this breakdown. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much. Whether you're watching on YouTube, streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunch Time VIP, or listening on your favorite podcast platform. For our podcast listeners, anything that I reference on the screen here, don't worry, I got you covered. Let's start what we always do, and that is the season win betting win total. Back in June, you could have gotten the season win total for the Hawkeyes at 7.5. If you took that over, Kurt Ferentz got you another winning ticket there as they went over that win total. Now, when we look at our in-season composite win total, 3 very unique but very predictive data points help shape how we see this team week in and week out and give us a composite win total. We were a little bit higher on the Hawkeyes last year as we had them at a 9-win team. I think when I take a look at that schedule, I'll be able to quickly diagnose which game that I felt like they possibly could have won, but just came up a little bit short. Speaking of schedule, let's go ahead and talk about 2 very unique but 2 very important data points. That is your strength of schedule and your strength of record. Now, we take a look at both of these data points equally because we want to know not only how strong was your opponent's strength of power rankings, but we also want to know what was their win-loss record. And for the Iowa Hawkeyes last year, a strength of schedule of 42.1%. Folks, that puts you at 53rd there for the Hawkeyes. Now, when we take a look at their SOR, and before I do that, let me backtrack just for a moment. So your strength of schedule, so when you play in a big-time conference, like the ACC, the Big 10, the Big 12, or the Southeastern Conference, you're only going to control about 20 to 25% of your schedule, basically your non-conference. Your in-conference schedule, pure luck of the draw. So let's get back to Iowa's strength of record. 50%. That was 89th out of 134 Division I teams last year. So their opponents' power rankings from an overall standpoint was solid. Their opponent's win-loss record, not so much so. So let's jump right into the Iowa Hawkeyes and let's pull up their schedule here from last year. And we're going to go through their opponent's win-loss record. And we're going to bypass the FCS opponent in Illinois State. Iowa State was 10-2. Troy was 4-8. Minnesota was 7-5. Had their bye week. The Buckeyes come in, they were 10-2 in the regular season. Washington was 6-6. Michigan State was 5-7. Northwestern 4-8. Wisconsin 5-7. UCLA 5-7. Their final bye week, and then Maryland was 4-8, and Nebraska to end the regular season was 6-6. So as I mentioned, not a lot of high caliber wins on this resume, or I should say opponents with win-loss records. 3 of their opponents finished with a over 500 record, so 7-5 or better. It's telling me the quality of your resume notwithstanding, and that's why you see that strength of record hovering down in the high 80s and not a little bit higher. Now, let's take a look at the quality of defenses that the Iowa Hawkeyes faced last year. We're going to use a baseline number of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams we had last year. So, Iowa State came in with the 11th best defense last year. Minnesota was 18th. Buckeyes, number 1 power ranked defense for us last year. Washington Huskies was 43rd. Michigan State was 63rd. Wisconsin was 36th. UCLA was 50th, and Nebraska was 14th. So 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. You look at an average power ranking for their opponents of 43, you're looking at a team that would have probably had a defense on a 7-5 team there. So I mentioned the one game that the Hawkeyes lost that metrically they probably should have won. Look no further than that second game on the schedule when they lost 20-19 to Iowa State. That was one that they literally let slip through their fingers there. Now, let's break down the offense because there's a lot to unpack here, and we're going to go ahead and fly right into it. So for the offense, I'm going to give you the NCAA average in a category. I'm going to give you our Hawkeyes, what we're going to call their accounting stats, basically what you would see if you looked on any reference website there. And then finally, we're going to give you our adjusted number for that category. So the average team last year scored 28 points per game. You're looking at the average for the Iowa Hawkeyes also being 28 points per game. And when we adjust that for an opponent, goes up about a field goal to 31 points per game. So when we adjust their data for opponents, they're actually 3 points better than what their actual data shows. Average team last year, 227 yards passing per game. We know the Iowa Hawkeyes and the forward pass do not dwell in the same sentence. 132 yards per game passing, one of the worst in college football last year. But when we adjust for opponent, it does bump up a little bit to 146 yards per game. Now, the ground game is where they make up some of those yards there. Average team last season, about 160 yards per game. The Hawkeyes were at 199.8. When we adjust for opponent, that rushing number shoots up by almost 33 yards per game to 233 yards per game rushing. So their running game was actually even better than what their data shows. And then total offense per game, 387 yards per game in total offense. The Hawkeyes accounting stats say 332 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, goes up 47 yards to 379 yards per game. So puts them basically right there in the ballpark of an average offense from a total offense standpoint. Now, let's get to some of the advanced numbers here. The average team drives ending with a score, either a touchdown or field goal, 40% of the time. The Hawkeyes were at an adjusted 49.7%. That is pretty good. Average team drives ending with a touchdown, 29%. Again, when we adjust that for their opponents, 34.7%. So fantastic job there. And then third down conversions, the average team about 39% last year. Hawkeyes right there at 40%. This team did a great job of protecting the quarterback. 15 sacks allowed in the games that we tracked. About 9 below what the average team surrendered last year. And of course, being a well-coached team, the Iowa Hawkeyes committed 11 turnovers. So phenomenal job there. But when we dive really deep into the metrics, and we call these our 3 E's, how effective, how explosive, and how efficient was your offense last year? Our Hawkeyes have some work to do. As far as an effective offense, they were 50th out of 134 teams, 60th in explosive offensive plays there, and then finally 46th in efficiency. Our Hawkeyes ended the regular season for us last year as the 53rd ranked offense in college football last year. If I had to bullet point this offense, it would absolutely be a ground and pound but inefficient aerial attack. Let's take a look at the defensive numbers here. And when we get into the breakdown here, I'm just going to give you their accounting stat for that category and then our adjusted number. Again, we want to know the quality of offenses now that the Iowa Hawkeyes faced last year. Going to stick with that baseline number of 68 there so we remain consistent. Iowa State had the 16th best offense, power ranked offense for us last year. Minnesota was 58th. Ohio State came in with the 8th best power ranked offense last year. Wisconsin, 66th. Maryland was 60th, and Nebraska was 67th. Only 6 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. And what drags that average number down of about an average power ranking of 68, they played 3 teams outside of the top 100, including Troy, who was the 100 power ranked offense. Coming in right behind them was Northwestern at 101, and then Michigan State right behind them at 103. This Iowa Hawkeyes defense did not face a high caliber schedule of offenses. 2 teams inside of the top 25. And as I mentioned, 3 teams outside of the top 100. So their defensive metrics will get adjusted for that. So the Iowa Hawkeyes gave up 17.1 points per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it is right there at 17.6. As far as their passing yards per game allowed, 196 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it does go to 171 yards per game. So an improvement there of 25 yards per game. When we look at their rushing stats, this team was absolutely phenomenal against the run, allowing just 118 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, it does go up significantly to 154 yards per game, a negative of 36 yards per game when we adjust that for opponent. So their rush defense, when we adjust for opponent, shows that this run defense was not nearly as elite as their accounting stats say they were last year. And then finally, total offense allowed per game, 314 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, just goes up to 325, still well below the average defense last year. Now, let's dive into the advanced numbers here. As far as their adjusted opponent's drive ending with a score, either a touchdown or field goal, just 29%. As far as their opponent's drive ending with a touchdown, just 17.5%. And then their opponent's adjusted third down conversion, 36%. All well below the averages in those categories. And then when we look at their sacks on defense, right there on the average of 23 sacks for the season, that's literally what the average team was able to have last year. This team was not that great on fourth down defense. Their opponents attempted 11 fourth down conversions in the games that we track, converted 7 of those. So you're talking about a conversion rate of 64%, well north of the average of 53%. Did do a great job of forcing turnovers, 24 forced turnovers. Absolutely phenomenal there. And when we look at their 3 E's, as far as effective defense, they were 29th. As far as not giving up explosive plays on defense, they were 14th. And as far as being efficient on defense, they were 21st. The Hawkeyes ended the regular season for us as the 20th ranked defense overall. If I had to bullet point this defense, I would say strong, but struggled a little bit against the run when we adjust that for opponent. As far as their special teams goes, I would say the special teams were the best, one of the best units probably there in the Big Ten. When you look at their field goal percentage, 85%, phenomenal, did make all their extra points. did average 5 punts per game, but they were able to flip the field 44.2 yards per punt. That was 28th in college football last year. Love their turnover differential, plus 13 in the turnover differential. That was 11th best in the country last year. And folks, this team did not make a lot of bonehead penalties and mistakes there. So you got to love that as a head coach when you're committing less than 3 penalties per game. 27 yards, that's virtually cutting the average there in half. Now, let's talk about Coach Kirk Ferentz in one-game situations and quality opponents. In one-score games last year, Coach Ferentz was 1-2, so just 33% there in one-score games, and against quality opponents last year. Kirk Ferentz was 4-2. Looks like I had a little bit of a typo there on my data, but still, phenomenal job there against quality opponents, 67%. And we know that Coach Ferentz is not going to put his defense in a bad position. So as far as how much Coach Ferentz would go for it on fourth down from a percentage point, you're looking at 3.1%. Out of 144 coaches that qualified last year, he was 143rd, which is a little surprising when you look at their conversions. 3 out of 5, 60% they're converting on fourth down. So potentially was that something that may have cost them 2 victories when you look at the game against UCLA where they lost that one by 3 points, as well as losing the Iowa State game by 1 point. Could very well have been the difference there in one, if not both of those contests. Now, let's talk about the quarterback play since we have a few minutes here. Let's start with the quarterbacks. And we saw really Kate McNamara in 8 games absolutely struggle. 60.5% completion percentage, 1,017 yards, 6 touchdowns to 5 INTs. He averaged 5.9 yards per attempt. So absolutely no pushing the ball down the field. And then when you look at 9.8 yards per completion, folks, that's about 4 yards below really where you really want to be at as far as a passing offense there. But we know this offense was driven by the running back Caleb Johnson in 12 games, 240 attempts, 1,537 yards, 6.4 yards per rushing attempt, 21 rushing touchdowns. This young man averaged 128 yards per game rushing. And if you add his almost 16 yards per game receiving, this is a back that you could literally bank or 140 yards of total offense every time that the Hawkeyes took the field last year. So phenomenal back that they are desperately going to be missing here. So let me fly through their offensive splits in their victories and in their losses here. In their 8 victories, 34 points per game, 130 yards per game passing on 19 attempts, 6.7 yards per attempt, 10.3 yards per completion. 43 rushing attempts, 233 yards, 5.4 yards per rushing attempt. Let's take a look at what they were on third downs. 40% conversion rate on third downs in those victories, 60% on fourth downs. Only committed 2 turnovers in those 8 victories. In their 4 defeats, this offense was only averaging about 16 points per game, 136 yards per game passing on 22 attempts, 6.2 yards per attempt, 11.3 yards per completion. The rushing numbers are what really stands out to me. 30 rushing attempts per game, so almost 13 fewer rushing attempts per game for 133 yards per game, still 4.5 yards per rushing attempt. So it was the lack of this team trying to play from behind and not being able to stick with the ground game really cost them in those 4 defeats there. Still converting 40% on third downs, did not attempt a single fourth down attempt in those 4 losses, did commit 9 turnovers in those 4 losses. Let's take a look at the defensive splits here. And in their 8 victories, 12 points per game allowed. Their opponents, 177 yards per game passing, but on 33 attempts, 5.4 yards per attempt, 9.1 yards per completion. Their ground game was non-existent running up against this Iowa Hawkeye defense in those victories. 28 rushing attempts per game, but only 87 yards per game, 3.1 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents converted just 33% on third downs, did convert 67% on fourth downs, but the Iowa Hawkeye defense forced 17 turnovers in those 8 victories. In the 4 losses, defense giving up 27 points per game, 235 yards per game passing on just 31 attempts. Yards per attempt go up almost 2, actually does go up 2 yards per game, 7.4 yards per attempt, 10.8 yards per completion. The rush defense, this team was getting run on in those losses. 37 rushing attempts by their opponents to the tune of 179 yards per game rushing allowed, 4.9 yards per attempt. That's a difference of 92 yards per game more in those losses than what they allowed in those victories. Their opponents converting third downs at a 44% clip and did convert 1 out of 2 fourth down attempts, forced 7 turnovers in those 4 losses. So the offense giving the ball away and the defense could not generate enough turnovers is what stands out to me. So let's get to the Hawkeyes' final grade, and then we'll give you the final verdict. The Iowa Hawkeyes will get a final grade of a B. You win 8 games, you exceed your season win total from a betting standpoint. That's going to give you a very solid grade. Let's get to the final verdict. The Iowa Hawkeyes were a strong defensive team with an excellent run game, but their lack of a passing attack and lack of aggressive by the coaching standpoint on fourth down decision makings cost them a chance at a higher win total. The Iowa Hawkeyes concluded the 2024 season with an 8-5 record, including 6-3 in Big Ten play. However, this offense under Tim Lester, when it faced stiffer competition, just did not show up and answer the bell from a week in and week out standpoint. So the final verdict, the Iowa Hawkeyes season was marked by inconsistency. While their defense remained stout, the offense struggled to find rhythm, especially in critical moments. Close losses, including the games where the Hawkeyes held double-digit leads, underscores the issue of game management and execution. The departure of key players such as running back Caleb Johnson and quarterback Cade McNamara further highlights the need to develop depth at the skill position. To compete at a high level in 2025, the Iowa Hawkeyes must address offensive inefficiencies and bolster their defensive secondary. In my final moments here with you, I'm going to give you 3 keys for the Iowa Hawkeyes in 2025. First and foremost, enhance the offensive consistency. Develop a more balanced and unpredictable offensive scheme to keep defenses off balance. Key number 2, they must strengthen the secondary. Focus on recruiting and developing defensive backs to prevent those big plays and improve the pass coverage area. And then this one is for Coach Ferentz. You must improve the game management situation. You got to loosen up the reins and be willing to take a few more calculated chances on third down, emphasizing situational awareness and decision making to secure leads and close out tight games. If our Hawkeyes can focus on these three areas, the Hawkeyes can aim for a more successful and competitive 2025 season.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.